You're listening to Coming of Cage, a Nicolas Cage podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast. I am your host, Derek. I have my lovely longtime friend and co-host, Ryan, with me.
Hello.
Hello. And this week we are talking about the 1995 Nicolas Cage film, Leaving Las Vegas. Before we get started, we do want to provide a trigger warning for people. This film has some disturbing themes and imagery and content, including alcohol abuse, sexual assault, and other intense, serious things of that nature. So if those things are things you don't want to hear about, we would recommend maybe skipping this episode. So just kind of some warning there before we get started. Leaving Las Vegas. This is the film that Nicolas Cage won his Oscar for, and his co-star Elisabeth Shue was nominated for. The screenplay was also nominated. This is a fairly critically regarded well movie. Where would you like to start, Ryan?
I mean, I don't know. I have notes. More than I thought I would for this movie because, it's pretty well, like you mentioned, critically well received movie. Most of the notes aren't like necessarily nitpicky stuff like they have been in, like, for example, our Inconceivable episode or some of those. It's more just like things I found odd or like filmmaking things that were weird. I don't know. Good things also. I'm trying not to focus on the negative as much. Plus, this movie didn't have a lot of negative in it, at least in terms of like storytelling and things like that. So, but literally like first scene of the movie, we're going like, this is at least 80 to 90% Cage right out of the gate. Like he's dancing.
Oh, and he's dancing in the grocery store.
He's grabbing alcohol. He's throwing in his cart. I do want to say that for me, this movie, if you don't know, it's about an alcoholic and a sex worker. And personally, I don't drink. I never have. It's something I've just decided to not do in my life. And my significant other has drank a fair amount of alcohol in their life. So I thought this was a really interesting movie for the two of us to watch together because we have very opposite perspectives on the things happening in this movie. Mm-hmm. And I had to refer to her a lot in terms of like, oh, do you think that that's good? Is that like, something realistic? Or, we all know that Cage can get a little crazy at times. And I didn't know if that was necessarily a realistic depiction of certain things. So I had to call in our guest commentator.
To be fair, films also tend to not portray things particularly accurately.
That's
anyway, right? Let alone what an actor's decision may be. So I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask somebody who does have that experience. I did read that Nic Cage purposefully recorded himself drunk so then he could see what he was like drunk, how he acted, how he talked drunk, to try and mimic that in the performance.
Yeah.
So maybe that is just how he would be in that situation. And somebody else, like your SO or even myself, may be totally different. And to be clear, he's not just an alcoholic. He is purposefully trying to drink himself to death because his wife left him because of his drinking. That part's a little ambiguous on purpose in the film. And yeah, I mean, it kicks off with him dancing in the grocery store, which for an instant gave me a little bit of Big Lebowski vibes because that's how the Big Lebowski opens up, is with the dude in the grocery store. But it takes a turn. It takes a turn really quick.
Yeah, it does.
One thing I think that is just important to point out, because I didn't know this while I was watching it, and I had to read about it because it bothered me and I needed to find out if this was a mistake or this was on purpose. But the earlier parts of the movie, basically before he's in Vegas, they're not in chronological order, like on purpose.
Right.
Which I think is a little confusing, that it's just kind of bouncing around between before he was fired, after he was fired, right? All those different types of back and forth. I kept seeing things as like continuity problems and production like goofs when they're actually just purposefully not in order. Did that throw you at all?
It was a little weird, but it didn't bother me that much.
Okay.
I mean, it did maybe in the moment, but like once I figured it out, it was fine.
Yeah, see, I never figured it out on my own. I had to read about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But, the movie starts off really kind of on a somber note, right? This guy is sad. He is depressed. He's drinking himself pretty intensely. We don't know yet that he has plans to drink himself to death, but he's drinking quite a bit, and he gets laid off, and you can tell that, his boss is sad about that like it needs to be done, but he's not happy about it. It's not an act he wants to do. And Nick has this opportunity to kind of be emotional early on where it's like one of the few real moments where he isn't necessarily completely like wasted out of his mind, and he kind of chokes up a bit, on the verge of tears, knowing that he's losing everything at this point. And I think that's kind of like, that's his rock bottom.
Probably. It's hard to say for sure because, we're really only seeing these highlights, lowlights, whatever, of his life. But yeah, it probably is. My second note was finger suck, which I think that maybe the woman in the bar, I don't remember exactly what that note was. Somebody was sucking on somebody's finger and it was really awkward.
So that scene sticks out in my head because it had to do with the continuity, what I thought were the continuity issues. So he's picking up this woman. He's still in LA. I don't know if she's supposed to be an escort or a prostitute type person or just a woman that he picks up, but she is acting as if she is going to be performing some sexual acts. And in the process of the flirtation is sucking on his finger, and she removes his wedding ring.
Yeah.
In that scene. And he wakes up in the next shot. He wakes up on the floor of his kitchen. The refrigerator's open, and he realizes this must be the next day. And he realizes his ring is missing at that point. So that scene stuck out to me because then immediately he has the ring back when he's at work getting laid off. And
right.
That threw me off. But that was like, that was
a really awkward scene.
There's a lot of awkward sex scenes. There's a lot of awkward sex.
And to be fair, this is a movie about a sex worker.
It is. But it came off a lot more awkward than I ever thought it would.
I think as intended. I mean, I feel like I'm not, like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not a drinker. I'll probably say that a lot throughout this, but I feel like, drunk sex is not like probably the most glamorous thing in the world. So I feel like awkward is part of it. And there are scenes later in the movie that we'll talk about where it's portrayed as a much more like not awkward, fantastical thing. And it's brought back to reality really quick in those moments. But in the early movie, especially, there's a lot of like awkward sexual related things. Mm-hmm. I agree.
He's extremely intense and vulgar at times, like when he's in the bank, for example. It really shocked me. It really caught me off guard. I knew next to nothing about this movie going into it. I knew it was his Oscar. I knew it was about a guy drinking himself to death, and I knew it took place in Las Vegas. That's about all I knew going into the movie. And I never expected it to be so vulgar, so intense, so kind of chaotic.
Are you talking about the scene where he's like recording this whole thing about what he wants to do to the bank teller?
Yeah, and that's that's the initial example. Yes.
Yeah, I think they were trying to establish what this movie was going to be early on, so that there weren't like it wasn't any confusion about what you were about to watch, because the whole movie is. So I'm comparing it to a newer movie, Logan, that I've talked about on other podcasts that we've done before, where it's like an extremely dark movie that has a message that it wants you to see, and it's very well made, but like I'll never watch it again because it's just dark and depressing, and the ending, we're not going to get into that yet, but like it just ends in a dark, depressing way, and just there's nothing that makes you want to revisit those movies, I would think.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. This movie was a lot. This was a lot for me to watch. There were multiple times where I just, part of my language, I was just like, what the fuck? And a couple of times where I was like, I don't really want to keep watching this. Like if we weren't doing it for a podcast, I might have not finished the movie.
Wow. So you
Uh,
did not like the movie.
that's not fair because it's about a really serious, heavy topic. So I don't mean it as a insult or a criticism to the quality of the movie as much as just it's so heavy and serious and dark at times that like I'm just at a point in my life where I'm cool not consuming that kind of media.
Yeah, that's fair.
You
I mean,
know?
I think it was important for me as a fan of Nic Cage, and I thought I had seen this movie before, but apparently I was confusing it with some other Nic Cage movie because this was all very new to me too. But I think if you're a fan, then this is an important movie because, it's the one he's gotten the most credit for. So, even
Yeah.
I would hope you would have finished it out at least, and you did for the podcast at the very least. So my third note says he's an alcoholic. Because
Hey.
they really, really were driving that home, like early on, in case you were like, I like to think that Derek and I are pretty sharp guys, but if you're not as savvy of a moviegoer, or we're wearing a blindfold the entire time, they want you to know that he's an alcoholic, and they drive that point in pretty hard.
And this is where my lack of experience with alcohol kind of makes me wonder how realistic some of the stuff is, because I don't really drink either. I don't not drink. I drink like maybe one thing a year at most. And I haven't been drunk since I was like 21. And so, it's not really my thing. So when I see, his motel room, it looks like a bar, or like what he gets at the grocery store. And I'm watching him. There's a scene fairly early on. I think it still takes place in LA, but it's at a strip club. And they keep cutting back and forth between him chugging a bottle of liquor and the woman on stage. And it's extremely tense. The music's really tense. It's a very intense scene where you're like, not sure he's going to end up in a hospital by the time, they cut to something. Right. And he's just downing this whole thing. And that's just like early stages of what this alcoholism becomes as the movie continues. And I do wonder, if a person could really do that for like the month that he says it will take. Like, does it really take the full 4 weeks? I am curious.
From what my significant other said when we were discussing this, and I was asking her how realistic this was, she was mentioning that he was putting away a significant amount of alcohol, which we can all tell. But that it's not necessarily unrealistic because when your body becomes so dependent on it, and early on you see like when he isn't drinking for a little while, he starts like a scene at the bank. Mm-hmm. He goes to cash a check, and he can't even like sign the check because he's shaking so bad. And my significant other said, that's DTs. Yeah. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. And so when she brought that up, I was interested in what that is, and I knew what withdrawal is, but there's an actual specific thing called delirium tremens, which is a severe alcohol withdrawal, where it can lead to shaking, confusion, and hallucinations. And so it was really interesting that they portrayed that. It's something for me that I won't ever experience, I hope, and that, maybe somebody that has battled with alcoholism has experienced. And then she mentioned that this leads into wet brain, which is a thing that basically means your brain is getting destroyed by the alcohol. That's an oversimplification, but it's right. It's basically a life-threatening brain disorder. Mm-hmm. That you see him start to suffer from that later in the movie. And the fact that they were super realistic about this, I mean, it was interesting for me.
Yeah.
As depressing as the subject was, especially knowing and caring about somebody that went through, alcohol addiction issues. It was interesting, informing, and sad, really.
It really does show, why Nic got the award for the performance, because as the movie progresses, his condition obviously is worsening. And there are points where, he basically can't function, like literally. Yeah. And it was intense. It was hard to watch. And I know it's fake, like it's not real. I watch movies all the time. I know they're not real. Right. And I'm watching this and it was hard for me to watch that.
I
And
want to say the
usually,
makeup team did a really good job too.
yeah.
Because, it's easy to go overboard on stuff like that. But the makeup for him was really believable, I thought. And I did think it was interesting that like when he was in his withdrawals and stuff, his eyes were really red and like, they did a really good job of emphasizing that. But then when he's drinking again, he looks more normal and fine. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of scary to me that, people, that's probably helped a lot of people live their lives and you wouldn't know. They look completely normal when they're drinking because their body's so dependent on it.
Well, that's, the term functioning alcoholic, right? And that's kind of where he is earlier on in the movie, is that he needs it to function. That's when he is that's when he is able to sign the check, right? That's when he's able to carry on a conversation and appear suave. And when he doesn't have it in his system, that's when he, can't hold a pen and can't keep the job and, yada, yada, yada. So they were able to encompass quite a bit of range here fairly early on before the movie kind of, heads off in its ultimate destination.
Yeah. And that brings up my next note, which was long intro, because just that introduction, where he loses his job and all this other stuff, didn't time it, but it was just a really long intro before the title card for the movie, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. It's funny, in the first parts of the movie, before he gets to Vegas, the movie feels older than 1995. Like just the way it's shot, the way it's organized, the title card, things like that. It felt older to me. And then he makes it to Vegas and it felt totally normal. But I don't know. Maybe it was when stuff was shot. I was reading a bit about how like they didn't get a lot of permits. So they were doing a lot of things in single takes and some of the stuff was shot in different order. And so maybe that had something to do with it. But early on, I kept having to look. I'm like, is it really 1995 or am I getting the date wrong? This is an 80s movie. But it felt
very 90s to me. So I'm not I can't say I share that same feeling. But my next note was that the dude from Third Rock from the Sun?
French Stewart?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was one of the, I put yap right after that, but it was just, I did not expect to see him here. And there's another cameo later on. It's not really a cameo, but a scene with somebody else that I was like, holy shit, is that person? And yep, it is.
It totally threw me off like that because I was so not expecting him. That took me totally out of it.
And I think this was way before. Well, I mean, I don't remember when Third Rock from the Sun came out, but I feel like this had to have been before Third Rock from the Sun.
I don't know. I never really watched it as much as I like the cast from the show.
I only watched the reruns decades later.
I'm not sure, but it was because it's a very serious scene.
Yeah.
He's
like a Russian mobster or something.
I guess I will say, because we're going to be getting into it, that part of the movie.
Like her working for the or like being a part of the mob or whatever.
Well, like, I mean, her having like a pimp type person, I'm sure that there's a lot of realistic aspects to that. But the whole, like, when Nick's on his way to Vegas and he stops at the gas station and there's these mob guys clearly there having a phone call and they're eyeing him and all this stuff. Later, they're the ones who are going into the pimp's hotel room or apartment or whatever to assumingly go kill him. And it just felt, I don't know the purpose that storyline served.
Yeah, it was a little weird. They like set up something and there was never any payoff. I think the storyline with her pimp was just to show that she was now like not paying a pimp.
Yeah, I just think there would have been a lot of ways to handle that.
Yeah, that was a weird way of handling it for sure.
Yeah.
My next note says lots of sex scenes.
Yep.
Yeah, there was. Scenes. Yeah, don't watch this with your parents if you're a young person. Don't watch this with your parents if you're an older person because it's awkward. It would be awkward no matter who you are watching this with your parents.
Yeah.
Peak 90s fashion is my next note, which this movie had some good Vegas 90s fashion. The shape of all the shirts and, just the footwear and everything else was great. I loved it. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of drinking and driving was my next note.
Tons of that, man. The scene where he's got the bottle, right? And the
cop,
the biker cop comes up and look, I mean, I don't know. I don't ride motorcycles. I don't know what that visibility is really like. I just find it hard to believe he didn't see that giant handle of vodka
Right.
in the front seat. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm out of line.
Yeah, that was a weird scene. So this the next note is, I think it was just to set up a pun. The inn, or the place he goes and stays, is called the Whole Year Inn,
Yeah.
which is a weird name for an inn, at least in my mind. And then like when he's drunk, I guess he sees it scrambled to be like the Whole Year Inn,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't really understand that whole thing. He's never shown to have like writing scrambled for him later in the movie or anything.
No, I think it was just supposed to be metaphorical. Like this is the hole he dies in was the plan. Right. And so I think he goes there, he sees the name of the place, and I don't think he's literally hallucinating the name. I think his brain makes the leap because it's convenient. Right. He sees the convenience and the coincidence that's the motel that he picks.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. It was just a weird thing.
Oh,
like the fact that he didn't that would never happen again in the movie. It's like when they set up his power for a superhero and then they never use it again, except for this one situation that it's useful. And then there was a weird shot of his hand. I think this was in the hotel. Once he gets in there and he's drinking, there's just like a zoomed in shot of his hand for like 12 seconds. And it just was odd.
Was he pouring a drink or something? I don't remember.
No, it was just like sitting there. Like his hand was just sitting, I don't even think it was holding a drink. I think it was his other hand, but it wasn't like showing it trembling, or maybe the whole point was to show that he wasn't trembling because he was drinking. I don't know. It was just a really weird shot that lasted way too long. I don't know.
I'll take your word for that one.
That's kind of nitpicky, but it was just a weird shot.
Yeah, I don't remember that one.
The next note is about the second cameo where I had to go, oh shit, is that guy? The guy at the bar, Arlie Ermy.
Yeah.
From Full Metal Jacket, and many other things.
Saving
things, Silverman, he was one of my favorites in that. But yeah, he was in this movie for like 3 seconds or something. And I know
they have a whole conversation. It's like a full scene.
I put a question mark next to it, but then when the credits came up at the end, he is credited.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to put confirmed after that.
They have a big back and forth because she's trying to see if he's interested in the merch,
right. Oh yeah, that's right.
It was weird seeing him with a beard. I don't know that I've ever seen him.
That's what threw me off, I think.
Yeah.
It was mostly his voice where I was like, oh, that sounds familiar.
Right? Yeah, the beard was weird. I don't know that I've ever seen him with facial hair.
Yeah, that was odd, but it's good to see him. R.I.P. He was good in all the stuff I've seen him in.
I forgot that he passed away.
Yeah. My next note says looking for him when she knows where he's staying, because she goes out and like she's okay. So this whole movie is like kind of framed around Nic Cage. Nic Cage's character is the main character, but then there's also these scenes that are like out of order that are Elisabeth Shue's character talking to someone, presumably like a therapist or something. It's never really revealed who this person is. I think she was talking to the therapist person when she said that she went out looking for him that night. And she has already been to the place he's staying once by this point.
Right.
So that kind of confused me that she was like out on the streets looking for him.
Yeah, that was really odd. Fun fact about those scenes, however, those were not part of production at all. Those were her test footage. That's her test screening footage. And so they inserted them into the movie to kind of help bring the narrative forward and help give her more screen time and character development. So cool way to look at it is she was nominated for an Oscar and like a good chunk of her performance was test footage.
Yeah. I mean, she definitely deserved to be nominated for that Oscar. There was points in this movie, and I'm still not entirely sure where I didn't feel like Nic Cage's character was the main character. He definitely was in the early parts of the movie, but I feel like as the movie went on, she became more of the main character. Mm-hmm. And I was okay with that because, Elisabeth Shue is great, but I haven't really seen anything where she got to like really flex her chops in like a serious dramatic role. So seeing this was really good, and I appreciate her more as an actress having seen this.
it was a nice, I thought they reached a really nice balance as the movie progressed. And it was interesting seeing their relationship kind of grow. Cause we skipped over their first encounter, where he almost hits her with his car on the strip. Right.
Yeah.
And then, maybe I'm naive, right? Maybe I'm naive and sheltered because I grew up in the Midwest, but he just assumes that she's a prostitute.
Have you been to Vegas?
For a work trip once in 2014.
So if you haven't been to Vegas, which you have, but I went there many years ago on a honeymoon with my ex-wife, and basically everywhere you walk, you're getting handed business cards of sex workers. People are literally like slapping their hands with these cards. They're handing them to you. Mm-hmm. And granted, when I went there, it was not 1995. So, but I feel like there's that city is pretty notorious for having a lot of sex workers. And so I'm not saying that it's okay to assume someone's a sex worker, but I feel like, it wasn't crazy for him to think that.
Well, because it's not just him. Right. Other people assume it, throughout the film. And so I don't know, maybe it might just be me then. But yeah, so he, propositions her and she agrees and goes back to the motel, which is what you're referencing.
Yeah.
And they don't sleep together. He just wants someone to be with him. And she accidentally falls asleep there. And that's when we kind of get the first real brush with her pimp. And how he's a bad guy. And this is where things get, ratcheted up to a different level of intensity. I was mentally prepared for the alcohol abuse because that's how the movie's described, right? Is this guy wants to drink himself to death because his wife left him, and he does it in Vegas. So in my head, I was prepared for that. I was not really all that prepared for the sexual assault and sexual abuse stuff that goes on. Like, he like cut her up off screen.
You really only see the scar later,
and that's later.
It's implied,
yeah, that's much later. But it's still, it's really dark. He hits her, all those different types of bad things, and that like it's like this movie was a series. It felt like it really felt like a roller coaster where you'd kind of things would start to get better for these two people. You start feeling like, they're going to be with their version of happy, whatever that is for them. And then there'd be some gut punch that would happen, so they have this nice, sweet night together. He's happy. She's happy. And then
but he literally tells her though, that he's going to be trying to kill himself essentially with alcohol that night.
For him, that's his happy. That's
sure, but I mean, overall, it's not a happy thing.
No, not at all. But what I mean by that is things will be going as planned, and then there will be something that veers it off course. And it just felt like each time just kind of felt like a little bit more of a gut punch.
Yeah,
it was a very emotional ride for me, which is abnormal for me watching film.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a testament to the performances.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like in terms of how dark it was and the themes of the movie, it felt like a more modern movie because really a lot of movies in the 90s and 80s were not like really serious movies like that. And this movie dealt with very, very serious topics. And so, yeah, like there's been a lot of more recent movies. One I've already mentioned, but that are dark and depressing and, deal with some more serious stuff, just to tell this for the sake of the story. And yeah, this movie felt like it feels nowadays to me like it was ahead of its time, even though it was recognized pretty heavily in 95. My next note says BF or GF, because at one point Nic Cage, I can't remember who he's talking to, but he asks them if they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I think it was a female character. And so I thought it was interesting how LGBTQ friendly he was in 1995.
Yeah, that didn't seem to bother him either way. It was Sarah, right? That he was asking because he wanted to ask her out on like an actual date.
That's right. It was her. Yeah.
Rather than just, hiring her. And Yeah, it's kind of an offhanded line, right? It doesn't feel forced. There's not a lot of attention drawn to it, but I think that that kind of dialogue is nice to see.
It is.
And
I will say that I thought I was a little conflicted about it only because, for a long time, two women being together has not really been as much of an issue.
true.
So I didn't know if it was maybe just because of his like sexual proclivities that he's okay with it because it's a girl and he wouldn't necessarily have the same feeling towards a guy, instead of bringing it up casually like that. But I'm trying to just, look at
There's no way
the
for us to
silver
know.
lining. Yeah, look at the silver lining for it and, enjoy the fact that it was not like a big scene, it was just kind of a line that happened and wasn't meant to be have a lot of attention drawn to it. Or anything like that. So yeah. And I think after this is when she like brings him back to her place.
Yeah, so this is where like parts of the movie were hard for me because of how quickly she was willing to accept him into her life because she doesn't know anything about him, right? She knows that he's trying to drink himself to death. That's what she knows. She knows nothing else about this guy. And she's dealing with, she's got her pimp who's clearly not a good person. And maybe she wants him there to, I don't know. I don't know why she was so quick to bring him home. That felt a little rushed to me. I know like there's a timeline here, right? He thinks it's only going to take him about a month to kill himself with the alcohol, but it still felt like she was really quick to accept him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do have that later in my notes somewhere that like it seemed unrealistically quick, but I think it's important to keep in mind that when people are like broken, which this character seemed to be, that a lot of times they are just needing that puzzle piece to fit into the metaphorical hole in their, soul, heart, body, whatever you want to call it. And so I could see somebody that's just so desperate for that kind of puzzle piece in their life that they've been missing to be super accepting, super quick of somebody. It was still a little unrealistic to me, but I try not to let it bother me too much. And Elisabeth Shue did a really, really good, believable job, I thought. And so that really helped me to accept that. But also, I realized that there are people out there that do feel like they're broken and that they need something else to fix them and make them whole again. And I feel like that maybe is what was going on here. They were both kind of broken people and she thought that they were better together and it made her feel better to have him around. So, but yeah, I agree. I was able to get past that, but yeah. Only thanks to Elisabeth Shue's performance though, because I can't think of another, I mean, I'm not going to say no other actress could have done that, but she did an incredible job with the character. So I think in this scene when she takes him back to her place, my next note says went from really good at sex to not great in the sack, because when he's hitting on the girl in the bar earlier on and the finger in the mouth thing happens, he tells her like, he just like shouts in her face that he's really good at sex. And he seems very confident about it. But then when she asks, to Elisabeth Shue's character asks to have sex with him, he says he's not great in the sack.
Well, because I think the difference is him overcompensating, to a stranger that he doesn't care about at all, knowing that he's too drunk to do it anyway, versus him talking to this woman that he actually has feelings for, that has feelings for him back, that he's now staying with. And he feels, they had that night together where they just stayed up and talked. He feels like he can be honest with her.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I get that, but it was just a weird, like, it shows the difference, I guess. It was meant to illustrate that. And somewhere in here, there was like a random shot where the camera just kind of zooms in on clouds for like 7 seconds. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
They're like really red clouds, like during a sunset or something. I was just watching it going, okay, what's this symbolizing? Because I don't really get where they're going with this.
No, it's like they had to pad a couple extra minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So they just kind of, the director was just like, just those clouds, and the camera guy just like slowly zooms in on these random clouds.
It's just some B-roll. It's fine.
Yeah. And then my next note says, close the door when you pee.
That was weird.
they're having like an argument or something, I think, and Elizabeth Shue's character just like walks over to the bathroom, which is behind like their living room, and leaves the door open and just starts peeing while having a conversation with him.
Yep. And
Yeah.
it wasn't even an argument. Maybe like it was more of like a disagreement. They weren't like fighting.
Right.
They were debating something. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, that was weird. There was like, I was just kind of like, all right, as an odd choice.
Yeah, it was a weird thing, but hey, you know, some couples are like that. They'll just pee in front of each other. I don't know if it would be me after like 2 days. But hey, you know, if it works for him, more power to him. Next, I had, how is he alive with all that alcohol? I can't remember exactly. I think this is when he went to his hotel room to pack up the suitcase, and the suitcase literally has like a shirt and a pair of pants in it, and then the rest is just all alcohol. And he literally is like drinking a full bottle of vodka at this point. Yeah. And it was pretty ridiculous in the beginning of the movie, but at this point it starts to be like he's not, like, he had to have a blood alcohol content that was just ungodly.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because he's not necessarily min-maxing here either, because he has a wide range of available drinks. You know, and yeah, he's got tequila and he's got vodka and he's got a bunch of different stuff. And,
he mentions bourbon at one point that somebody should come and have a drink of bourbon with him or something like that.
Well, I think that comes up later because he makes a comment. There's some stuff that he says on the tape or at the beginning that he wants to do with the bank teller and bourbon on her body.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's mirrored later in the movie when Sarah does that for him at the pool.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
My next 2 notes are basically just saying how wonderful Nick is in this and also how wonderful Elisabeth Shue is in this. And then she's almost too in love with him to be believable. I put in there also. I can't remember what specific scene set that off.
Well, I mean, the fact that she kicks him out when she finds him there with another woman helped legitimize it to me, that there was a line that, you know, she was accepting his drinking. He was upfront about that and she agreed to it, but there were lines did exist. She wasn't just going to put up with everything and anything. And that did help solidify things for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that did help. Chicks love the chest hair. That's my next note, because he had a very hairy chest in this movie. I mean, I think he does in pretty good shape. Yeah, I think in the 90s he did a really good. I mean, what year was that other movie we watched? The romantic comedy. It Could Happen to You. Yeah, so I mean, he was in really good shape in that movie. I think better than this movie. But alcoholism is not really intuitive to like bulking up.
No.
So then there was this weird underwater drinking shot where he's just like. Sitting at the bottom of the water somehow, like drinking.
Yeah.
And he has the bottle covered with his hand. It's just it was a weird shot.
Oh, I like that shot.
Okay,
cool.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, it was creative at least, so kudos there. I just didn't really get what it was supposed to be symbolizing. But then we get to...
I don't know that it was supposed to symbolize anything. It's just he wanted to get in the pool and he was going to keep drinking, you know?
How is he staying at the bottom of the pool, though? Like,
well, I mean, if you let the air out, you know, you can do that. You never did that when you were like a kid?
No.
Or anything? Oh yeah, you can. I mean, that's
okay.
a thing. Yeah.
Fair enough. And then we get to the point where
Ferris Bueller. You saw Ferris Bueller.
Oh,
right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
We get to the point where you were talking about where there's like this weird, almost like fantastical sex scene that's like, you know, her pouring liquor onto her body and like straddling him. And meanwhile, they're in like a public place.
Outside at a pool where there were people recently.
Yeah, but they do like make it they shot it in a way that like really frames the two of them. And I thought this was basically a scene that's like inside both of their heads of like how beautiful this moment is between the two of them, right? And then it's quickly brought back to reality. So you kind of get the perspective of like how they're viewing this moment versus how like everybody around them is viewing this moment and how sad this moment really is.
Yep.
When I think Nick is heading somewhere and trips and breaks a glass table and has like a glass shard sticking out of his back and he's bleeding. And the hotel lady or whatever she was, came over to help clean it up and told her to get out of the hotel by the following morning or that they'll be checking out.
Yep.
And I think at this point, this is like the third place that she mentioned that she really likes that she's now not welcome at because of Nick's character.
Well, because they get kicked out of a casino too. They're playing blackjack, and something happens.
It doesn't really show.
It's a little unclear because, and this is a complaint that I have about a lot of movies, that the sound mixing has gotten really frustrating for me. And in this
was 1995.
I know.
Oh, you're saying the volume levels.
Yeah.
Yes, it was like the music was really loud and the voices were super quiet.
And the casino scenes in particular, I couldn't hear. Like, I'm watching this at night, right? My kid's asleep upstairs, right? And like, I'm already blasting this movie when the music plays and I still can't hear the dialogue half the time. And I was watching on Paramount Plus, which if you watch on the Xbox app has completely worthless closed captioning.
Yeah.
It's very tiny, all black letters that you can't change at all. And you just can't read them. They're worthless. And so like, I can't use those, which I would normally use on say Netflix or HBO Max. And so like, I'm trying to make it out. I don't know what that confrontation was about.
No, I don't think they ever really said. I mean, it's just shown, at least when we watched it, it just seemed to be like showing a confrontation, like to show how he can get violent when he's drunk too. But yeah, I didn't really get anything with it either. It was just
weird because again, like, it's not hard to show somebody flying off the handle. That's not a difficult thing to do thematically. So it just seemed odd that we don't get to hear what set him off, because that is the most crazed we see him in the whole movie. And we have no real explanation as to what set him off.
Right. Like, yeah. He's not really shown to be violent.
No.
At any point in this movie, except for that.
And
somebody even comments at one point that he's not violent and that he just like, I think when he's meeting that first chick or the chick he cheats with, wait, does he take her back? No, he doesn't take her back. The woman at the bar. Yeah. Like the guy just gets like beats the crap out of him. And somebody comments about how he doesn't like fight back or anything. He fights with his words or something.
That was a weird scene too. I guess we kind of skipped over that. That was
it was a weird scene.
Uncomfortable scene.
But this lady hits on him at the bar, starts like licking his ear and saying that she's leaving her boyfriend and wants to go have sex with Nic Cage. And then like the boyfriend, like it's all baiting to get the boyfriend to fight, to beat up this drunk guy. And he doesn't really fight back. He just gets the crap kicked out of him.
There's so many uncomfortable scenes that I had forgotten that there's one very early on where he's at his bar drinking, and there's a businesswoman a couple of seats down that he keeps hitting on, and it's extremely uncomfortable.
No, is that not the one that like licks his finger, or like he licks his finger or something like that?
It's a different woman.
Yeah, that's the one where he says he's really good at sex, right?
Yeah. And the bartender, like, he eventually stops it, but he lets that go on for quite some time. And it was just an extremely uncomfortable scene.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just telling of the fact that even in the 90s, women were not treated very well, and with the recent things going on, it hasn't changed much. But that probably wasn't that unrealistic for something that could happen in 1995, sadly.
I'm definitely not saying it's unrealistic. I'm saying it's uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable, yeah. It was meant to be, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, right? At the end of the day, like, Nick nails this role. There's no doubt about that. As uncomfortable as it is, as intense and depressing that it is, it wouldn't be that if he didn't nail the role.
Right. And I could see a lot of people giving criticism that he seems like a little over the top, but that's sometimes when people are drunk or high or whatever, that's what it's like for them. Not everybody is like a fall asleep, pass out drunk. Some people get violent, some people get loud. Some people get very friendly, I
didn't think he was that out there. Like, yeah, there's moments where he raises his voice or he goes.
He has some cagey moments. He has some pretty cagey moments.
He's got some.
It let him flex his range a little bit.
Yeah, but I didn't think that it was excessive in any.
I didn't think it was excessive. I think it was completely realistic, but I could see that some people might say that it would be over the top. I didn't personally find it to be over the top. Neither did the Oscars, apparently, but okay, so at this point, I think I don't remember exactly because it's been a few days since I watched it, but he meets up with this other prostitute, sex worker that that apparently has been eyeballing him a lot. I'm
Well,
pretty sure
we
earlier
see
in
her
the
a few times. It's
yeah,
like
it
she
shows
wanted to
her
get
several
back at
times,
Sarah, is
but
what
it
it
doesn't
really
show
felt like.
why really.
No.
So yeah, she's like trying to get Nic Cage's character to hook up with her, and he does. And Sarah walks in, and I wrote in my notes at this point: is it hypocritical to be mad at him for sleeping with other women when she sleeps with other men?
Yes. That's, I
Okay.
mean, no, it's not hypocritical for her to feel that way because she has a job and he accepted that and they're in a relationship together. And so if he's going to go sleep with other people, they need to have a conversation about whether or not that's okay, because that's not his job. He doesn't get
Right.
paid to do that, right? It's not how the bills are paid. He had sex with another woman to have sex with somebody. She does it to make a living. And she was upfront about it, just like he's upfront about him drinking himself to death. And if they both want to accept those things, that's up to them. But she never signed on for him sleeping around.
Right, and that's totally fair. I mean, but it just shows you that how quickly they jumped into this relationship without actually like having a discussion. I could see somebody being drunk and in their drunken stupor being like, well, she sleeps with other people, so why can't I, you know?
Well, don't forget that like I don't think they've actually had sex at that point.
No, she was just like half naked on him.
Well, no. What I mean is Sarah and him haven't actually had sex, and she keeps wanting to sleep with him, right? But he either can't do it or what have you because of all of the drinking. And so it hurts her to see him trying to do it with somebody else when he won't do it with her.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think at this point is when the movie went really quick, 0 to 100 for me. There's a pretty graphic, they have a fight because of him sleeping with this, or like trying to sleep with this woman. And she leaves and starts taking other jobs. And she shows up in this hotel room. She tells this guy that she doesn't do multiple people at the same time or whatever. And he keeps offering her more and more money. And she eventually agrees to do it. And so she goes into this hotel room, and it's too young. Everybody looks like a teenager to me, but that's also possibly because I'm old.
They're supposed to be on the younger side.
But yeah, it looks like 3 teenagers, and one of them seems to be autistic or have some sort of issue going on. That makes them maybe an easier target to like manipulate. And so this kid seems to have hired the sex worker to have sex with their autistic friend or brother. It's not really ever told. And she says that she won't do it because they're giving her a hard time. And he says, I think they tell her that he wants to fuck her in the ass. That's specifically what he says. And she says that she's not going to do that. And the scene gets worked up, and the autistic individual punches her because that's the vibe he's getting from the room, I'm assuming. The amped up energy.
She makes a comment implying that, maybe he or they are gay. And that sets him off.
Well, it sets the other guy off, and then when he gets all worked up, it sets the other guy off that hits her.
Yeah,
because they're kind of feeding off the energy,
right? Yeah, and
it spirals from there. There's like very graphic sexual assault taking place. Well, I guess it isn't that graphic. I guess just the implication of knowing exactly what has transpired is graphic because you're filling in a lot of the gaps in your mind. Yeah. And then that scene, she gets hit in the face several times. And it's just really nasty. And then the next morning, I think it is, or maybe later that night, she gets into this taxi.
Yeah.
And this fucking taxi driver makes like the worst fucking comments. I mean, this movie, it's like almost all the movies that we reviewed so far. Everyone in the movie is a giant asshole. And I guess Elisabeth Shue's character isn't, but like everybody else in the movie is. And this taxi driver makes jokes about her having anal, like anal sex that she wasn't expecting or something along those lines. And it was like extremely terrible. And like my note literally just says that fucking taxi driver.
Yeah, no, because I mentioned it to my wife. I was like, other than Spider-Man, everybody in these movies are just like horrible people.
Yeah.
And they just kind of make Nic Cage the not horriblest one.
But he's still pretty terrible.
Right. He's still terrible, but he's not the most terrible. So you kind of root for him.
Right. Yeah. When you're comparing him
case,
to rapists and, people like that. Yeah. It's
right. He's not a rapist. He's not a pimp. He's not some type of Latvian mobster.
Right.
But he's still not a good person. And yeah, Elisabeth Shue's character, Sarah, is probably the only decent person in the movie.
Yeah. So, I think when she gets, there's like a gratuitous scene of, I don't know if it was gratuitous, maybe that's not the right word, but there's a scene of her just like sitting in the shower bleeding. Yeah. That was super depressing. And like, I understand that's what they were going for. So it's not like I'm complaining about how depressing it was. It was just like a little too grounded for me. Like, and I know it's meant to be that way, but it was tough to watch. That was probably the toughest scene to watch. Well, when taken in context.
It's a really hard part of the film. And, to my point earlier, like that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting the alcoholism. I wasn't expecting this. And it just really like, it was hard.
It does seem like most movies that feature sex workers like that always seem to have some sort of sexual assault scene. Maybe not quite as intense as this one, but
it is not uncommon to
it's not great
portrayed that way. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of sex workers out there and I'm sure they would rather see a portrayal that wasn't them just being assaulted.
Yeah.
So that's disappointing.
I would like to see that too. So, it's bad. It's definitely like one of the low points, if not the lowest point of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's meant to be for sure. But I don't know. This next part is pretty rough too, but like, so that she gets a call from Nic Cage's character saying to come over or something along those lines. We don't really hear his end of the conversation. It's just what her responses are to him. And she gets to this hotel room and he's basically fucking dying.
Mm-hmm.
And, I put my next note was call an ambulance, because instead of calling an ambulance, she sits next to him and her hand ventures.
Well, so real quick though, before we get to that, you have to remember, so she gets kicked out of her house.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She lives in this little kind of gated apartment or townhome community where the husband's supposed to be the cool guy and the wife is very uptight and suspicious of this woman who's doing things, right, that are unseemly or whatever, is just looking for an excuse, and they kick her out. Right. And so she has to get her own place. And so some time passes here. Yeah. It is unclear exactly how much time, but it's not like the next day or something like that. To me, it felt like maybe a week, but I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. And so she goes over to see Nic Cage's character, and the wet brain has basically fully set in at this point, and he's clearly dying on this bed. And her hand reaches down. And my next note says, is she jerking him off?
Yes.
Yeah. She, on his deathbed, decides that she needs to jerk him off.
Well, and then they have sex.
And then my next note says, what is this movie?
So it's very clear, right? At the very beginning, they basically made a deal. She was okay with him drinking himself to death. He was okay with her being a sex worker. And those were the terms. And for her to call an ambulance would be to go against him drinking himself to death. He would never forgive her for that.
I mean, I don't think that's the bigger problem. I think her just like jerking off a dying man.
Well, and then they sleep together. That's the one time they sleep together.
Right. But that's okay to you? Like, that seems like
it's not okay to me, but it was okay to them is the point. Cause that's how he died. Like when he wakes up after that, right? It's like the next morning or whatever. He wakes up for a moment. He sees that she's still there. He smiles and dies. So what we're supposed to believe here is that was the best possible way for that relationship to end. He got what he wanted. She got what she wanted. And they ended it on a positive note. Now,
I can't imagine
world,
in a million years that any woman would want to like immediately jerk off a dying man.
I agree with you, but that,
it's
like,
just
I would never be in either of their shoes.
Sure, it's just
right?
That's where it got to the point of being unbelievable for me. It's like there's no way in a million years that this would be a thing. I wouldn't think, but
the problem is, by that point, I already had to accept the conceit that she's okay with him killing himself with alcohol. Right. And for her to be okay with that, and it's shown throughout the film that she has to be okay with that. There's one moment where they kind of talk about it, but she ends up being okay with it. That by that point, it was just like a way for them to seal the relationship. And of all the things that happened in the movie, that wasn't like one of the harder things for me to accept.
Okay. Well, I guess it was just me then. But my next note says, is he dying or orgasming? No, because he makes some like weird like noises.
Well, because it's after the sex. Like they had the sex. They cut to the post-sex scene where she's asleep. He's asleep. He wakes up. He smiles and he kind of like breathes out his last breath.
Well, but there was, I think when they were actually having sex, he was making noises that made me wonder if that was him like dying, like rattling breaths of his dying or rattling breaths of his near-death orgasm.
I think it's the latter.
Yeah, it was weird. And then my last note for this movie says, who is she talking to all that time? Because again, I think the movie ends with her talking to whoever this is that we never find out.
Yeah, that's never resolved. We don't know anything really about that. We don't really know what happens to her either. Like, his story is wrapped up, right? He got to do what he wanted to do. And we're not exactly sure how long it took, but it seems reasonable that it took approximately the 4 weeks that he said. But we have no idea what happens to her. Here, she still had been assaulted recently. He just died. She just got this new place. Her pimp's dead, supposedly. And so I guess she just goes on with her life. And
I guess,
that. Like, it's left very just like open. Like, yeah, his story ended, but nothing else is really wrapped up.
So yeah, you care about her character, but then you don't really know anything that happens to her character after he dies.
Well, because the whole reason we're given that she's accepting him and being with him is that she's lonely and she wants to have somebody. And that's kind of contradictory to the whole relationship because she knows it's got an expiration date and a very soon expiration date at that. And so once that's over, she's back to that kind of square one of not having somebody again.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Is she just going to find another self-destructive person? And is that just like, was this the first domino in a series of self-destructive people that she finds?
Or was this the last domino? Now she's, got that piece of her filled and she's hoping to move on. Yeah, it's never really, we don't know.
Right. We just don't know. And it's weird because like this is a big movie that takes place in two massive cities here in this country. And yet like there's really only like 3 main cast members in like the whole movie.
It feels like a much smaller movie.
It does. Right. And 2 of those people die. And then there's Elisabeth Shue's character, Sarah. And that's it. Like that. Those are the cast of the movie from a primary standpoint. So it's a little wild how little is like wrapped up at the end.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, does she stay in Vegas? I mean, she's been kicked out of a casino. She's been kicked out of a living complex. She's been kicked out of her favorite little kind of hideaway resort that she goes to. If I was in her shoes, I'd probably leave that town behind and start over somewhere else. But, I don't think she does that.
I mean, I don't know. We don't know. There's nothing shown.
Because she just got that new apartment. So I would imagine she's staying there. But I don't know. Right?
Probably. Yeah. But we don't know how long that is in the future. Yeah. We don't have any kind of anything. So yeah, that's the end of the movie. There's no post-credit scene.
Nope.
Setting up Leaving Las Vegas 2. Electric Boogaloo.
That's right. Yeah. No, nothing weird with the credits.
No.
I mean, there's a sad piece to this production as well, just in the real world. So John O'Brien was the author of the book that the movie is based off of. And he actually committed suicide 2 weeks after production began on the movie. Yikes. And Figgis, the director, and the studio, they contemplated just shelving the project because, that's pretty intense and that's very serious. And they decided that it would be a good memorial for the author. And so they obviously went through with it. And the Rolex that Nic Cage's character, wears in the movie and pawns in the movie was O'Brien's watch, the author's watch. So it's just kind of an interesting thing there. The book, I believe, is supposed to be at least somewhat autobiographical to some extent. And, that O'Brien dealt with at least similar feelings, if not similar events. But
I did think it was interesting how cheap that he sold that watch for.
$500. Yeah.
Is that what it was? Yeah. Cause nowadays that watch is a lot of money.
Yeah. Thousands.
Rolexes have gone
15
up.
grand, 20 grand, something like that.
Rolexes have gone up crazy value. Yeah.
Yeah. $500 is what he pawns it for.
Yeah.
Which again, is another weird scene where the pimp's right there pawning stuff.
Yeah, but they don't interact at all.
They don't interact. So Nic is in the same room as the pimp. He's at the same gas station as the Latvian mobsters. No one ever interacts.
Yeah.
So these stories are like ships passing in the night.
Well, that's why it feels like such a small story, I think, because everybody, even though you're in this giant town, everybody's around everybody else.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yeah.
So we need to rate this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. So we have our Cage meter. Our Cage meter is a 20-point scale. We have two values that we rate on. We have the quality of the film, 0 to 20, 0 being the worst thing we've ever watched, 20 being the greatest movie ever made. And then we have the Cage scale, which is how cagey is our Cage.
I don't think it has to be cheesy. I just want to throw that out there.
Cagey.
Yeah. How much does he get to go into that trademark Cage mode?
And that's, 0 being the most straight, almost monotone you could be, and 20 being the pinnacle of cageness. And so, yeah, Ryan, where would you put the quality of this film?
Well, keeping in mind that it's an Oscar-winning movie, it's probably Nic Cage's best critical performance of his career. It's got to be a 17 or an 18. I think the movie itself was a really good movie that told the tale it wanted to tell, especially considering it came out in 1995. Will I watch it again? No, but I think it was a really good movie, especially if we're comparing it to the other movies that we've watched.
Okay, so do you want to give it a 17 or do you want to give it
Well, I think it depends where you're at because, if you said it was a 17, then I would be sure. But if you said it was an 18, I'd be sure. So
it's tough. So you say it's his most critically acclaimed film, and he did win the Oscar for it. But from a rating standpoint, just from critics, it's not his highest rated movie by a lot, actually. And so I do wonder how much is it I wasn't in 1995, I was a kid. So I don't know. Was this considered Oscar bait at the time? Was this?
Watching it, I felt like this was an Oscar bait movie.
Okay.
But I didn't watch it in 95. So, maybe it was different back then. But if this movie was made nowadays, it would 100% be an Oscar bait movie. There's no other reason to make a movie like this.
That's fair. Man, that is tough. So, just for some retrospective, I gave, let's see. I gave The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent a 17, and we gave Spider-Man we gave Spider-Man a 17 and a half. And I feel like I enjoyed both of those movies. Well, enjoy is not fair, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, this wasn't a movie you were meant to enjoy.
I'm more impressed with Spider-Man from a technical standpoint or from a film standpoint than this. I think it still pulled off a much harder job.
But this movie was made in 1995.
I know. I'm not saying it's bad. I think I would.
No, I just think it's important to keep in context that these types of movies weren't really made in 1995. So we're judging movies that are much newer in a more modern era. It is tough to keep that in mind, but
I'm going to give it a 15.
Okay, so we'll put mine at 17 and just meet in the middle at 16.
Okay. Now, caginess. Caginess. What do you think?
Probably like a 15 or a 14, somewhere in there. I think he was not, that's why I want to specify it doesn't necessarily mean cheesy
Mm-hmm.
when you say caginess. It just means that he gets to like really get creative and, go out on a limb. And I think he did get to do a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
in this movie. That opening scene is probably one of the highlights of, if I was going to show somebody what Nic Cage was like as an actor, that opening scene would probably be in there.
Right.
As would like the scene where he's hitting on the woman, probably.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was going to give it a 15.
Yeah. I think
For
that's
this,
fair.
just like 15 across the board, and you're giving it a, what'd you say? A 13 or 14?
No, I think I said 15 or 16. So I think 15 is totally fair.
15. Okay. So that means we've got a 16 on the quality and a 15 on the Cage, which puts it up there. It really does. It kind of puts it in the realm of The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So it puts it pretty high up on the list.
Which is a little weird because they're very different movies.
Extremely different movies. And to your point earlier, like I would watch The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent again for sure. No question. I probably will never watch this Leaving Las Vegas ever again.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's our score on that one. We have our Wheel o' Cage, so we will spin that later and find out what movie we're going to watch next. But I've got to add a new one to our wheel that will replace Leaving Las Vegas because we only hold 18 movies on our wheel. And so the movie that will be replacing Leaving Las Vegas is an interesting one. It is Industrial Symphony #1, The Dream of the Broken Hearted, which is a TV movie that he did way back when in 1990. So there you go.
Nice.
That's added to the wheel. Be sure to check out comingofcage.com to see me spin the Wheel o' Cage and find out what movie we're going to be talking about next on the show. And you can catch all of our other episodes on various podcast platforms, including a version of it on YouTube. And you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and the whole nine. Ryan, anything else before we head out?
No, I think we covered everything.
All right. Well, thank you for watching, everybody. Let us know your thoughts on Leaving Las Vegas, and we will catch you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.